Hello everybody, welcome along to this video. This is Mr. Johnson Teaches Unseen Poetry, some revision for you. Getting you as ready as we can for the time in the exam, which is Literature, GCSE, Paper 2, Section C, where you will be faced with two different unseen poems. The first part is talking about one of those with a question, and the second part is the comparison of two unseen poems. So this video really focuses on talking about one of the poems. So without any further ado, I've chosen an unseen poem for us to have a go at, and there's another activity to get us started as well, so here we go. The first thing I want you to do in a minute is, when I say so, is to pause your screen, because we need to talk about metaphor. The poem we're looking at today is absolutely clearly using metaphor, and therefore a lot of the poems do in the exam as well, where something is symbolising something else. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a minute is to write down the words bull, open sky, kite and anchor in your book with some space next to them, and when you pause, I'd like you to write down what those different things could be a metaphor for. So think what they could represent, they're almost like the words that you would associate with those things. So looking at the bull, to give you a little bit of extra help perhaps, think about how it could represent strength. Think about how it could represent aggression. Those are certainly two words I'd write down, where a bull could be used as a metaphor for strength. It could also represent aggression. So there we go. Get ready to pause this video and write down any other things that you can think that those other ones could be metaphors for, and I'll go through those with you in a few seconds. So make sure you pause the video now. Okay then, so thinking about an open sky, hopefully things like freedom would be a really good one there. An open sky says there's nothing stopping you. So there's like no obstacles, so you could write things down like no obstacles. But I think freedom would be a really good key word to have written down if you haven't got it already. Add it. A kite, very much again freedom, fun. Those are two words I'd definitely write down. I'm trying to think if I got any more to hand, but I'd say freedom and fun would definitely be good. Energetic perhaps as well, the way that they move through the sky in a crazy pattern. And an anchor, so something very heavy, weighing you down would be an anchor. That's what it represents, holding you back. So it doesn't have to be single words with these metaphors, it can be multiple words or phrases like you just heard. So those are the ones you definitely want to have, and you will see a few of those objects featuring in today's unseen poem working as metaphors. So that's your first task done then, and just a recap of metaphor done. What I want to do is look at this poem today. It's a poem by Simon Armitage. He is one that many people will know already because his poetry features in the anthology. You're almost certainly not going to get a poet who you recognise, but we can use his poetry as an unseen one. It's untitled deliberately, but I want to go through the steps with you. 4 steps, but what we're going to do is read through the poem quickly first. And actually we do this together. If you could get a copy of this poem by just Googling that first line in Simon Armitage, then that would be really good, because you could have a go at highlighting anything that leaps out at you as well. I'll demonstrate that for you in a moment, but let's do reading first. So, mother, any distance greater than a single span requires a second pair of hands. You come to help me measure windows, pelmets, doors, the acres of the walls, the prairies of the floors. You at the zero end, me with the spool of tape, recording length, reporting meters, centimeters back to base, then leaving up the stairs, the line still feeding out, unreeling years between us. Anchor, kite. I spacewalk through the empty bedrooms, climb the ladder to the loft, to breaking point where something has to give. 2 floors below, your fingertips still pinch the last 100th of an inch. I reach towards a hatch that opens on an endless sky to fall or fly. Now this is a poem where you basically have a mother and a son. Son is moving into a house for the first time on his own, so we're presuming he's grown up, and they're there measuring all the different things. They need to buy some curtains, so they're measuring the windows, they're measuring the floors for carpets. It's a real significant moment, however, because if you can look at that as almost a metaphor for growing up, he's moving house and they're measuring, and then he's moving up through the stairs, she's still holding on to the tape measure. He says it unreels years between us. Anchor, kite. She's down at the bottom holding it like an anchor. He's like a kite at the end of a string, floating away, wanting to be free, wanting to be on his own. So actually it's a really clever poem to use metaphor. But anyway, the question is on the bottom rightish of the screen there, and it says, how does the poet present his relationship with his mother? It's the sort of question you might expect to get in the exam. It's worth 24 marks. You've got about 25 minutes to do it. What I'd like you to do, if you can, pause this now. If you've got a copy of the poem, even better. If not, just take a few seconds with a pause screen to look at it and decide anything you would highlight, and then I will reveal in about 5 seconds the ones that I've highlighted. So pause this video now, please. Okay, and here's what I came up with. If you've got something different, it doesn't mean you're wrong. This is about opinion and what leaps out at you, things which seem to be important. I went with those ones. The fact it starts with mother, the word you is represented, he's almost addressing it at her. You've got some of the different metaphors like acres of walls, prairies of floors, acres and prairies, two absolutely enormous things. The anchor kite metaphor in the middle, something has to give, and pinch is like an unpleasant feeling, so almost like clinging on. And then at the end you've got the endless sky, fall or fly. I've highlighted a lot of the metaphors which represent something else. That's step one with an unseen poem. The first thing I would do when you are faced with an unseen poem, highlight the things that leap out at you. Step two, look at the title and its connotations. This one is untitled, so we wouldn't be able to do that for this one. Can we work out the message of the poem, however? Well, looking at this one, it's a poem about growing up, it's a poem about moving on, and it's a poem about relationships between parents and their children, and maybe talking about whether parents are reluctant to let go of their children. I won't go on about that too much now, but it's certainly something I appreciate more now I am a parent. I can imagine it's very hard to let go. As a child, you just want to be given the freedom. Of course you do. Let go, let me do it, let me have a go, stop nagging. All of these things that you probably have had said to your parents at one point or another. Anyway, so we've got a message of the poem. You'll need to think about that again later when we have a little go at writing. Decide on your 3 choices of line and what the methods are, label them. So of the things which you have highlighted if you've had a go, or looking at my screen, the things that I have highlighted, what 3 things are probably the most important bits of the poem, and then labelling them. So for example, the anchor kite, we could label metaphor, her holding him back is the anchor, kite equals him wanting to be free, maybe the endless sky being a metaphor, and maybe the you would be a good choice, like talking to his mother, the direct address there as well. Those are 3 things I'd probably go for. Step 4 is constructing your answer following the PEAR structure, the pair structure, which we're going to do together in a moment. So here's what you need to do. If you haven't got pen and paper right now, pause this video and go and get some, because I want you to write down the example that I create as I create it. That way you can listen to my thought processes, and then the next stage is you having a go following the structure of the paragraph that I'm literally about to write. These are some Viper's Cave questions for those who are part of that, but I'm going to ignore those for today. But if you are one of my classes who are watching this video and I tell you to, I'd like you to have a go at those Viper's Cave questions. Everybody else who's just using this video as revision, we can move on to having a go at writing a model answer. So here we are then. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to answer this question. How does the poet present his relationship with his mother? The poet presents a relationship where the son is, I think it's a son. I've always presumed it's a son. No, it doesn't seem to make it clear. So I'm going to go with where the child is ready to move into their own home, growing up, if I could type properly, growing up. However, the parent still seems protective and unwilling would be a nice word there, like not wanting to, unwilling to let them go. Right, unwilling. Why do you not like unwilling? Oh, I'm a typo, have I? Okay, I have now answered that question in a sentence, and that's great. So I'm already away with that one. Next up, however, is going to be naming a method. The writer, I've already said that, I'm going to go with Armitage. Armitage shows this through his use of, and then we need to name something he's used. At the very start of the video, we talked about metaphor. Let's go with that. He uses, through his use of a metaphor, I could put a full stop there, but I'm going to lead into my quote straight away, where now I'm going to try and do a different one and let you do the anchor kite one, because I think that's more straightforward. So I would suggest when you do yours in a minute, you use the anchor kite metaphor in the middle there. But for a minute, I'm going to go with this endless sky. He does this through his use of metaphor, where he describes, I'm going to quote it there, and endless sky. which I've dropped in. So I've embedded that quote, which is quite a nice way of doing it, rather than just having it like separated. I've dropped it into my sentence. It's got an endless sky where he may, and I'm just quoting the words I need, fall or fly. Right, I'm going to run out of room, so I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. Hopefully you can still read that perfectly well. Right, an endless sky where he may fall or fly. Now what I'm going to do, so I've done my P, my E, I've done my point, which is answering the question with a method. I've got my example in there. Next up is my analysis and then talking about the reader. This is why I really start picking up marks when I'm being detailed. I need to put a bit of the poem under the microscope. Therefore, I need to choose something which I've done here, like endless sky or fall or fly. I'm going to choose the word endless and analyse that by describing the sky with, if you know what word type it is, you can put adjective, because it is an adjective for endless sky. But if you don't know, you could put the word by describing the sky with the word endless. You get just as many marks for that. But I'm going to go with adjective because I know what it is. It's a describing word. With the adjective endless, he is suggesting. Now, what is he suggesting? There's an endless sky. We talked earlier about the metaphor of a sky being like freedom. If it's endless, something doesn't end. It doesn't have any boundaries. There's nothing stopping him. Suggesting that there are no boundaries and nothing stopping him. Now, stopping him what? Well, this is a poem about growing up, and therefore there's nothing stopping him making his own choices for his future. Brilliant. If I stop there, okay. If I can put something else, that's even better. Even though he may fall or fly, the speaker still seems to suggest a positive tone. I'm going to go with. Now that's quite deep, I think, there. If you were struggling, I could have just go on to say something else about endless sky. So I could have talked about how endless means that maybe he's not being controlled by his parents anymore or something like that. Whatever you do, you're trying your best to add a second idea about your quote. One idea, good. Two ideas, more marks, because you're thinking more deeply and the examiners like to see you thinking more deeply. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to my final bit, which is I'm really going to talk about the reader or the writer. And at this point I'd like to talk about the writer's message and perhaps what we're trying to be taught. Perhaps is always a really good word to show your thinking. Perhaps Armitage is showing us the relationship between parents and children. That's not really said anything so far, but here we go. And how it is important to let your children be free and to make their own mistakes. That's not a bad way of ending. What is a decent PEAR paragraph, which I'm just going to colour code for you quickly, just while I have time. So there's that bit. We've got that bit, which is the evidence. Then we've got the analysis, which runs all the way down there. And I did 2 bits of that, which is really great. And then finally, here is my bit talking about the writer's message. Now, I've got just enough time to say, have a go yourself, but as I talked about, have a look at this anchor kite metaphor. So your beginning might be very similar to mine. Feel free to borrow some of the sentence starters if you find that helps you. But then when it gets to this point, yes, it's a metaphor, but this is where you are going to need to drop it in differently. And then really, this yellow and pink bit is where you're going to take over. Try and see if you can rephrase the pink bit a little bit more into your own words rather than just copying exactly what I've said. Have a think. But ultimately, this is what they're looking for. Can you name a method that the writers use to show what they think? They think this about the growing up. This is the method they use to show what they think about growing up. Here's some evidence showing that metaphor. And then analyse and then writer's message. Have a look at some of my other videos if you're still feeling like you need a little bit more confidence with unseen poetry. It's not something that's easy to prepare for, but if you know the structure, like I've just shown you there on that screen, that you're going to have a go at in the exam, then you're much more likely to succeed. And they will always choose a poem where there is something you can be saying about them and methods that you'll be able to pick out, and you're likely to be able to work out the message. The question, gives it away a little bit. Present his relationship with his mother. So, thanks very much for watching this video all the way. I wish you the best of luck when it comes to your exams, and goodbye.